Welcome to Muffin Talk.
Kia ora and welcome to Muffin Talk. This program is brought to you by the initiative Titipounamu, Study and Joy. My guest today is Dr. Joe Grayland. Kia ora, Father Joe or Dr. Joe. A warm welcome and haere to Muffin Talk.
Thank you very much, Beata.
Dr. Joe Grayland is an assistant lecturer in the Department of Liturgy at the University of Würzburg in Germany. He has also been a priest of the Catholic Diocese of Palmerston North here in New Zealand for more than 30 years. While in Palmerston North, he wrote a column called Pastor's Desk, Liturgical Formation and Celebration. Father Joe, you've recently given a presentation for Titipounamu Study and Joy with the title Liturgical Inculturations, a Dangerous Concept? Exclamation mark. First of all, how do you define inculturation?
That's a very complex question, and I'll try and answer it as simply as I possibly can. The idea of enculturation describes a double movement through which the church makes the gospel present in a culture, and at the same time, the people who are there in the culture come to the gospel with their own cultural understandings. So it becomes very complicated in the way that we worship. So, for instance, when people have a belief in a system of gods, as we do in New Zealand, for instance, in the Māori world and also in the Pacifica world, then there is, to begin with, a conflict of these two structures of deity and these two structures of belief. So when the church comes to a country or to a culture with the gospel, it also brings with it a liturgical tradition and presumptions about how God is worshipped. There it encounters cultures where they have their own understanding of God and their own ways of worshipping. And so what begins then is a process of adaptation. In the perfect world, adaptation. In the imperfect world, it becomes a matter of colonialization and takeover, where the local culture and understanding of God and the local ways of worshipping are pushed down or pushed aside, sometimes brutally, and the church, which happens to be European in this context, just simply implants itself and says, here's the real truth, here's the real church, here's the real way of worshipping. Do this, or we will punish you. Okay?
Can you give us an example of that inculturation?
Yeah, so for instance, when in New Zealand we talk about Papatuanuku and we talk about Papa and we talk about Earth and we talk about Papatuanuku as a woman and as a deity, as a god in this structure of belief. And so therefore immediately we have a conflict in Christian theology with the triunity of God, Father, Son, and Spirit, in which there is no feminine divine. And so therefore you have to begin to look at and ask, what and who is Papatuanuku? What does Papatuanuku mean? And if the church says that Papatuanuku has no valid place, then you begin to say to Māori that their structure of belief and their understanding of divinity and deity, their cosmos of belief, needs to change. So it's a very complex world. But what happens then after that is adaptation takes place. And adaptation is something we're seeing now in New Zealand. If we take adaptation, after a process and a period of time, then the church begins to look at rituals that happen elsewhere. For instance, we take marae rituals and marae protocol and we bring them into the church or into the celebration of the liturgy in some way. So that we might take the karanga and use that. Or we might take the mihi and use that. Or we may take the idea of the porphyry and rework it so that it fits into the Roman ritual. And that would be called adaptation. And that's the place that most people are at. Then when we talk about inculturation, it's when Māori rituals and understandings of belief become part of the ordinary practice of worship and become part of the ordinary structure of understanding how the church is and how she operates. And so at this stage, you have a much deeper understanding where the penetration of the gospel into a specific social cultural environment really picks up on the spiritual qualities and gifts that are already there. It strengthens these gifts and qualities and perfects them, but it also does this in terms of the gospel, in terms of Christ. So, in terms of inculturation, you can never get away from the reality that the church is coming to a culture with the gospel, and that the gospel, who is then Christ, of course, is then perfecting that local culture. So, again, you have a huge point of tension and of struggle when I say something like Māori culture must be perfected by the gospel. And then people will say to me, but wait a minute, the culture here is good. It has its own value, it's upstanding. Why should the gospel be any better than the local culture? And it becomes even more complex when people say, but wait a minute, the gospel is surrounded by a culture. The gospel is not culturally free. It's surrounded by thousands of years of Judeo-Christian thinking and theology, thousands of years of Hebrew, Jewish, Hellenistic, Roman, Germanic, Frankish history and culture, European, and all of that sort of thing, so that the gospel does not come without its own baggage. So, Beata, I haven't answered the question easily because it is so complex.
Well, I
But
wonder, because interculturation must have started the moment that Jesus was not doing exactly what the Jewish tradition said. So if he reached out to people who were not, who were in the sense for Jewish people non-touchable, or he spoke to people who were not part of his culture, is that also inculturation already?
no, not really, because he's still within his cultural mores. What he's doing is pushing the cultural boundaries of his own world. The gospel becomes much more enculturated for the first time when it leaves Jerusalem, really, and goes to places like Antioch, which is in today's Turkey and was a Hellenistic city. And so St. Paul, is the one who really enculturates the gospel in a very clear way, in that he astrides these two cultures, both Hellenistic and Hebraic. But then there's also the culture of when it goes then to Egypt, to Alexandria, and then moves along North America, and from North America into Spain. And that's where this central belief picks up its enculturated forms. And so, what you see in the very earliest days of the church is that they take over local cultural forms. So, for instance, the whole concept of Mary, the Mother of God, the Theotokos, when you dig deep down into all of that, then what you find at the basis is the concept of the goddess Isis. And when you come back up out of that, then you see there is clarity that needs to be put in to say that she is not a god or a goddess, but she is the bearer of the god. And so all of that is done because there's a whole other thought world that begins to influence how we see things. And primarily, that is a Hellenistic world. And in this Hellenistic world, they have another concept of God, which is very important, that all of the Greek gods and the majority of other gods are dangerous to us, so that they are entities that can change their mind really fast. And so whenever a god and a human get together and they fall in love, as many of the stories show, either the god has to give up divinity and become human and then die, or the human has to enter into the divinity through death, and therefore they can no longer exist. So therefore we are given out of this tension the story of a God in Jesus Christ who is both human and divine, equally so, and that these two realities don't cancel each other out. So it's complex that you can see that, but they pick up forms of worship, they pick up gods, they pick up languages, they take places of worship, and they repurpose them as Christian.
Out there, oh, peace is calling. In the bonds of love we meet. For the world, a new day dawning and shining.